Hello and welcome to this discussion on scientific research in India. There is no doubt about the ability, the talent of Indians working in science today. But are we following the right formula when it comes to encouraging more young people to take up careers in scientific research? Why do so many Indians seem to be doing their best research in science abroad? Joining us to discuss this, we have a great panel here today. The one and only Mr. Narayan Murthy, best known to the world as the co-founder of Infosys. He is also trustee of the Infosys Science Foundation, which governs the Infosys Prize, an annual award to honor outstanding achievements of researchers and scientists. And he comes from a family of teachers, so science education would be of great interest to him indeed. Professor Navakantha Bhatt, a professor of electrical and communications engineering at the Indian Institute of Science here in Bengaluru. Professor Bhatt chairs the Center for Nanoscience and Engineering at IISc and is the winner of the Infosys Prize 2018 in Engineering and Computer Science. Professor Srinivas Kulkarni, he is one of the 6 jury chairs at the Infosys Science Foundation for the Physical Science category and is currently the George Ellery Hale Professor of Astronomy and Planetary Sciences at Caltech. Mr. Narayan Murthy, if I could start with you. What is your assessment really of India's contribution to scientific research? Do we exaggerate it? Do we make it less than it is? How would you assess it?
No, first of all, we have to distinguish between contribution of people of Indian origin and people living in India and doing research. If you looked at people of Indian origin, I think it's whatever we have contributed is reasonable. However, when we look at what we living in India have contributed, we are on a right path.
Okay.
We are improving day by day. However, we have a long way to go. There was a list of the top 4,000 researchers, I was told yesterday by somebody, in which there is only one Indian living in India whose name appears.
Yes.
On the other hand, I believe there are about 200 Chinese living in China.
In China itself, yes.
In that list. So therefore, while we are on a good path, we are working hard, we are making progress, we still have a long way to go.
Long way to go. Professor Bhatt, you are working at IISc, one of the best institutions in India. It's always ranked very high in any ranking. Do you agree with this assessment that much of the good work being done by Indians is being done by Indians abroad? Can Indians like yourself working in India contribute as well? Is it a level playing field?
Good question. I want to start by reiterating what Mr. Murthy said on an optimistic note, right? That we are in the right path.
Yes.
But given the size of our country, 1 billion people, one IISc is abysmally nothing, right? So we need 100 IIScs, right? So eventually scale matters. Right?
Okay.
So I think we really need to think about this as an ecosystem. Government, of course, starting from that, because they need to do right intervention. And also as a society, right? We need to attract the best talent to science. Research is very important. There are 2 aspects to research. One, of course, what we say blue sky research, which is extremely important. The other aspect is science for society, right?
Applicability,
research. Right? We need to really focus on that as well, right? There are multiple aspects to it. Government, in terms of investment in science, is less than a percentage of GDP today in India.
Really?
Which is nothing really compared to other countries, right? And also encouraging entrepreneurship, right? If you train scientists, what will they do? There are only limited academic positions, right? They have to translate their research, create value to research, and that can happen only if government comes up with schemes like what is called SBIR in US.
Okay.
You know, it's staggering $2.5 billion invested in supporting startups in US.
By the government?
By the government. Although there are dime a dozen VCs there, government still does that kind of an intervention.
It takes that
Absolutely.
interest.
Absolutely, yeah.
Professor Kulkarni, you are perhaps an example. You've done some fantastic work. I mean, I was reading about the work that you've done in your field, and it just sounds fascinating. But honestly speaking, could you have done the same work back in India? You are at Caltech. Could you have done the same kind of work in this country?
I'm sorry, the frank answer is no.
Oh.
I perhaps have the best position in my field in the world. For 13 years, I was the director of the Caltech Optical Observatories, which is Palomar, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and 30-meter telescope. That's an incredibly powerful position. And I would say it's not a question of India versus US, it's that particular place versus anything else.
The institution itself.
Yeah, so Caltech for 20, maybe 50 years, we beat out all of Western Europe as one institution. Okay, so when you focus and you have excellence, sometimes you can go and do great things. Britain was a very small country by land and by population, but dominated the world. So things are not necessarily always scale, go with scale. But let me come to one point which I would say from a different perspective, both of my two colleagues here. Yes, in India we need to, there's no question, we need to invest a very large amount of money because the base is small. That's more than anything else. What we're investing is now small, is what we're hearing. And it takes time to spend money actually properly. However, there's one basic problem in my opinion, as both a teacher and a researcher, which I think is fundamental to a fundamental flaw to the Indian research ecosystem. In the US, the best research is actually done by universities.
Universities.
Okay.
Yes.
The purely research institutions are actually not so well known. Or if they are, then they do very focused research. They're not so seen as very prestigious. They're seen to be programmatic. And I don't mean to say in a bad way, but I'm just saying this is how the society values it, and this is how young people value it. And as you know, there's a very famous professor at Caltech, Feynman, and during his peak career, he was offered a pure professorship at Enrico Fermi Institute, which is a pure research institute, and at 3 times the salary. And then he writes in his book, he thought about it, and then he realized the best research he did was because he teaches. So the structure we have taken in this country, which is unfortunately quite common, of separating universities to do rote teaching and then pure research institutions, is in fact quite detrimental to the way actual research gets done.
The reality is simply the data that we have. If you look at the citations, if you look at what the applications that our researchers have looked at and try to solve the problems of this society, while they're all very enthusiastic, I don't think we have sorted out. For example, India has problems of water. India has so much of solar energy. We should have been the first in the world to invent the conversion of solar energy to electrical energy. We should be working on how to improve the conversion efficiency instead of waiting for Israel to do or US to do or something like that. Therefore, I think we have not taken the opportunity to use the power of research to solve our own problems.
Professor Kulkarni, do you see, like in India, really the glamorous professions, the professions where some of the best minds are going, may not always be science in India for various reasons. In America, is there a feeling that scientific research is an attractive career? How can it be made attractive to young people to get the brightest minds, not just to one department, but on a wider scale?
I don't think it's, first of all, essential that young people see science as the highest calling.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, that's
I
interesting.
think I'm very much a person who feels if you should think what you want to do and do it.
Okay.
And you want to be an artist, fine. And and of course the challenge is whether you can make a living out of it.
Yes.
That's always a challenge if you follow your heart. So I don't have a particular, as a scientist, I don't think there's something very special about science.
That's very interesting. Okay.
It's a thing I like. Our culture is made up of all sorts of contributions, and if everyone was like me, it would be a very terrible society actually. So in the US, it's not true that the best minds go to science. In fact, it's unfortunate. I would say the best minds go to what I call as financial technology, Zytec, which is manipulating some financial instruments to make money out of without creating things. So that's
the Wall Street
yeah.
millionaires.
So many of our PhDs go finish PhD in astronomy and are in financial tech
Really?
industry. Yes, because it pays a lot. You can immediately start with $1 million a year, especially because the kind of mathematical background they have in astronomy and modeling background. Okay, and some of them go into weapons industries because that's what astronomy historically has provided. When I was growing up, it was a said thing, first it used to be, first it was an engineer, it was like number one, and there's an overproduction, then it was a doctor, okay, and then it became MBA.
MBAs,
and
yes,
then after that I left India, so I don't know what is the thing now. So that model I think should be replaced with, because life is more than doctor, MBA or an engineer, and of which science is one, and you have to be passionate to do science.
For some reason, starting from our primary education, we have not been able to raise the level of average student, not brilliant guys like Srinivas or Navkant. That's beyond 2 sigma. I'm talking of average people to be interested in doing whatever they do well.
Yes, as he was
Entirely
saying,
agree.
yes, yes.
I think that is the issue that we have to. Therefore, I have often said, if a country wants to make great strides in scientific education, in economic growth, in arts, in whatever you want, in cricket, in whatever, then there has to be a cultural transformation first. What is cultural transformation? That is, we have to embrace open-mindedness, we have to embrace discipline, we have to embrace good work ethic, we have to raise our aspirations, we have to strive for excellence. That, unfortunately, in this society has gotten left behind, and unless our leaders in various walks of life, including the corporate world, as well as in academia and other areas, they act as role models for these good values, for these good cultural traits, our progress in any field, whether it is scientific research or entrepreneurship or medicine, public health, cleanliness that the Prime Minister has been talking about, in none of these areas we would make reasonable strides. That is our problem.
Excellence in a chosen field, encouragement of people to do their best in whatever they choose to do. Practically speaking, what does it need for scientific researchers in India to be able to do even better? What would you see, what would you like to see from the government, from private establishments, from public, from educational establishments? What could make it better for researchers in India?
Yeah, I think, both Mr. Srinivas and Mr. Murthy have already alluded to it. There are three entities, right? One is government, and you also mentioned about industry and the academic institutes, right? All three have to move away from the known positions, right? Industry, for instance, right? Tata's 100 years ago started Indian Institute of Science. There are examples like that. And we had to wait for 100 years for, Mr. Murthy to start Infosys Science Foundation, which is also celebrating science, right? But we need a lot more of this. As you already mentioned,
so
right?
Scale of it,
and
yes.
similarly, we already talked about government interventions, right? Also academic institutes, right? They have to move away from their known positions.
Which
we
is what you
shouldn't
were
be
saying,
just doing...
that universities should be involved in research. That's,
more than that, we shouldn't be doing just a follow-on research, right? Somebody publishes, from some universities abroad, and you just take that and do an incremental work. That is not how science is done, right? You should be able to take big risks. So, risk-taking should be encouraged.
What else do you feel could help in India? What could have kept somebody like you back in India to do your work?
I don't know. In a personal way, it was I actually wanted to do my PhD in India at the Raman Institute. and my advisor to be, in fact, I started there, and then he said, maybe you should go to Berkeley, it's a better place for what I was trying to do. And then I never thought
Why
much.
was it better?
Because I wanted to do experimental
Yes.
research, which the telescopes and
The facilities, the actual facilities
yeah,
there.
were better there, and he thought that's what would be my strength and not what we had here. So it wasn't some big, I wanted to go to the US, but once I went there, I was very successful. So slowly you just only think, a year at a time, and next thing you know, 40 years have gone by. So I want to return to the deep connection between teaching and research. This, first time I became aware of it was when I was reading Feynman's book. And by the way, I did attend his class when I joined as a faculty.
You attended for
No, when I joined the Caltech as faculty, which I've been there for a long time. He was that time working on general relativity. And what I was struck by the book and just sitting at the back of his class was, I said, this guy has done a lot of stuff, so I should listen more carefully what's his ideas on this are. And that influenced me and even today. So, for example, I'm now doing a sabbatical at Tokyo Institute of Technology. And I started with a clean notebook, and I said, I'll invent a new course following the example in Feynman. And I said, okay, how to find black holes. It's not my topic. I mean, it's not like know nothing about it, but it's not my topic. And already within the second week, I'm already writing a paper, which turns out could have been written by people in the field, but examined new. So there's a very deep connection between teaching and research. So if you look at all the great US universities and the British universities, particularly Oxford, Cambridge, which have a tradition of 400 years, right? Then if you look at, MIT, Harvard, Caltech, Stanford, doesn't matter. Those are the places you think of. Now let me ask you a question. Which universities in Germany or which places in Germany catch your eye? If I ask you, name me 3 places in Germany which are fantastic in science world.
The names don't come to mind.
Yes. And the reason is, after Germany, on the other hand, had a fantastic, it led all of physics and chemistry before World War I. All of what you know about quantum mechanics, Einstein, everything
Came out
was
of Europe and Germany.
In Germany. Okay, how did this country, after World War II, become so nondescript in science? Because they divided after World War II into the Max Planck institutes, which is where you take a very talented person, give him money, and build the institute around this person, and which is a radically different approach than Cambridge, Oxford, or Harvard, for that, which are very similar in. And the Germans have come to understand their mistakes. So the Max Plancks are retrofitting themselves to take in undergraduates now, in a small way, or graduate students and all. It's very hard. It's many institutes in India are also trying to retrofit by TIFR or ISC have a small undergrad program, a slightly larger master's program. Doesn't work very well that way. It's good. I mean, it's better than not doing this in my mind. But it's much better to take the 400 or so university infrastructure we have here, okay, and that because that's where the young minds are. They're not at the research place.
The Gurukul approach, like centuries ago, India did make strides in astronomy and things. This is an election year, Mr. Murthy. When we have, of course, had a long, centuries, thousands of years contribution to science in India. But when you hear statements from politicians, from leaders about Ganesha being an example of grafting, the Kauravas being an example of test tube babies, how do you respond? Will this backfire on interest in science? Will it create interest, or will it... How do you respond to this? It's a bit of a political question in science.
No, I think I would like to listen to experts in any specific field. In politics, politicians are experts. In science, scientists are experts. In medicine, doctors, surgeons, they are experts. So these things don't worry me much. First of all, I am a layperson insofar as grafting and all the things that you talked about are concerned. Therefore, I would only listen to the words of those that have worked in a specific area. They have gained global recognition, they have done good work, and therefore they have built up their credibility. So it's a very simple problem for me.
As a scientist, Professor Bhatt, how do you react to statements like that, where we talk about flight, the Vedic contributions of India to science? How do you respond as somebody who really is a scientist?
No, it's very unfortunate the way narratives are being played out today. There are two extreme narratives, right? One, as you said, that everything was done here, so there is nothing to be done, which has no meaning. The other narrative is that India has nothing to offer to the world in terms of science and technology. These are two extreme narratives, right? Again, going back to what Professor Srinivas Kulkarni was saying, right? This idea of Shishyat Ichet Parajaya, has been there in our ethos, right? We need to have open mind, let noble thoughts come from all around the world, right? I think we should have open-mindedness. That is the beauty of science, right? And if we go with that, I think a lot of great things can be done in the country.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for this discussion. Open thoughts, the beauty of science, the desire to create whatever your field is, to do the best that you can in it. And if that is science, well, that's great for India, as long as it's new science, not repeating what somebody else has done. And the need really for the government, industry and educational institutions to push that interest, that curiosity, because science, it's such a magical field. And let's hope that India does learn to discover that even more so in the days to come. Thank you for joining us with this discussion on scientific research in India. Thank you for watching.